Hello and welcome to version 2 of World Tanks to the Garage. Um, I'm just going to be going through my tanks in my garage and just telling you guys my general opinion about them, going through a nice quick little overview of each one. So, I don't think there's any need to review this thing since you guys can't get it unless you already have it, but T186, very good gun, very good speed, but overall very poor penetration, and it also turns like a boat. I think I like this thing, A-. M24 Chaffee. This thing, I feel like, when 8.6 came and changed the camouflage mechanics, got hurt pretty badly. But its gun still makes a very effective weapon to take out isolated heavies. And overall, it's still a pretty darn good passive scout. Very maneuverable, very fast, very responsive feeling. A to this guy. T21, I have never stopped liking this thing because it can fill every role a scout can, but the gun can be a little underwhelming at times. Really, in effectiveness, when you're playing a tier 7, 8, or 8 game, you're a ultra fast easy 8. And overall, give this thing an A-. It's extremely flexible tank. M4 Sherman, I would give it A. Doesn't matter what gun you use, this thing will always do what you want it to do. As a jack of all trades, has amazing gun depression, and the like. E2 Jumbo, it takes quite a bit to get used to this tank, and you also have to make sure that you don't equip this turret as opposed to this turret. Once you figure out that you need to equip this turret, you will find that the E2 Jumbo is a very, very resistant tank. It is a very difficult tank to kill. With proper angling, it'll deflect tier 8 shots. So yeah, I would recommend running the M1A1 with the stock turret, because I feel as a howitzer doesn't perform well at top tiers. Overall, A. Super Pershing, I just made an episode about its changes in 8.8, and I do not agree with them. I'm not going to give it a grade for right now, but I imagine it would be in the B range. T29, this thing is just excellent. This thing is just fantastically amazing in every category, so A+. For whatever reason, I seem to play well in this, but don't seem to enjoy it. I'm not sure why, but statistically, it's an amazing tank, and I have fun in it, and I do well in it. Or I don't have fun in it, but I do well in it. So, T49 A+, I've talked about this thing before. The gun is so underestimated with its boosted rate of fire and such, and its speed, camouflage, everything is going for this tank except for its armor, so A+ to that guy. T25AT is essentially an American Jag Panther. It fills the role very well, and this thing is very flexible. Its armor is somewhat useful in tier 7 games, and that gun is a pretty darn good gun. It also has excellent gun depression, so you actually can kind of peek over hills with this. You can use it in that role. T25/2 is a tank I find most people overlook a lot. I would give it an A- simply because this thing is actually very mobile, and even though its gun only has 170 pen because it's the Super Pershing's gun, it can relocate to positions where it can still just chain in the shots into the sides of enemy vehicles. And it actually does have a pretty good rate of fire. M41, this thing doesn't like me. It tends to miss the target a lot, very inaccurate gun. Yeah, .82, but we know about that's not really .82 or whatever with the accuracy changes and such, but this thing tends to just never let me hit the target, so I'm going to give it like a B+. It's a little generous, simply because I think it might just be my bad luck. Cromwell, pretty much the perfect definition of a tier 6 medium. It's very fast. Its armor is not very important, but it still has some to resist howitzer fire. It's got a very good gun. that fires very fast and puts out lots of damage, and there's just almost no flaws with this tank. I barely see how they can let this and the EZ8 stand in the game together. Churchill 7 is a terrible tank. It gets a B minus, maybe a C plus, because you say, oh look, 152 hull armor, let's angle that and such. But the problem is, that's not 152. That's a weak spot. That's a weak spot. And thanks to genius British people, when you shoot the front of the traction, you detract the vehicle, you also hit the tank itself. Let's see. There's almost nothing positive to say about this, because this gun ain't that great either. So, it's slow, has a mediocre gun, its armor doesn't really work as advertised. TOG 2, I've explained, people underestimate this thing. It's an amazing bullet sponge. That gun puts out a lot of damage, and other things of the like. AT2, I find that this thing is a very... forgot to give the TOG a grade. Give the TOG a grade of A. AT2, I'd give the grade of B+, because I often find that the enemy teams do know what they're doing, and they just put shot after shot into that cupola until I die, and I die almost instantly. When you're forced to go close range with this pathetic 6-pounder gun. AT-15A, a tank I really enjoy. Unfortunately, I lost some of the replays with this thing. I had some very good replays in this. That gun chains out damage very, very nicely, and its penetration is pretty good for a premium. I'm certainly used to that penetration on the Super Pershing, so I played this thing extremely well. Of all the AT series tanks, it does have the fewest weak spots, being this and generally that strip right there. The only thing that really annoys me about this tank is the fact that, unlike the rest, it does not hold very high hit points. It only has the standard 850 for a tier 7. Overall grade, I would give it A minus, maybe an A. It's just really based on that hit points that really sucks. T25, very, very good gun for its tier. It's very fast. Its armor is pretty bad, but it also has a pretty large amount of hit points for a tier 4 or tier 5 medium. And so yeah, this thing's only flaws tends to be its pretty thin armor and its poor turret traverse speed, but other than that, very good. Give it an A minus. The MX-13105 is by far my favorite tier 5 artillery, so it's very accurate, and it does quite a bit of damage when you do hit, and it has pretty nice gold shells. APCR is very nice when you're trying to direct fire at something. So I'd give that guy an A. LTP. This thing is a T127 that's worse in every respect other than top speed. But it does have some sort of placebo effect because it looks much more modern than this T127, so I'm going to give this thing a B+, but when playing it, it feels better. I don't know why. It's probably just its general appearance. T127, I would give an A- because the gun's sometimes a little lacking, but in every other category, this thing is excellent. It has very good acceleration, it has very good armor, it has pretty much everything covered. T-34-85 is a tank I really enjoy. It has very, very good turret armor, a very solid 85mm gun that can be used to snipe, and can also put quite a bit of damage into enemies. So yes, this is a very enjoyable tank. It is actually quite fast. It is very capable of flanking. KV-13 is basically the child of an IS and a T-30-45. This armor is incredibly bouncy and is so underestimated because people almost never see these things. They just shoot shot after shot into the new, nice, super bouncy zones that this thing shares with the IS. KV-1, I never really enjoyed this thing for whatever reason. I find that people just fill my weak spots with holes, and it's really only useful for side scraping and that gun. Overall, I'd give it B+, but I know most people would say the opposite. I only bought this back so I can get the KV2. I'm gonna pause for a second and restart recording with Bandicam for a second. Okay, what do we got here? Churchill 3. This is just such a fun tank that I don't know what to say. Yes, it has the Churchill flaws, but it's absurdly fun, so just get yourself one of these. It fills this one value that I bought it, and that's fun. SU-122-44, very fun, very fast, nimble. The gun has incredible DPM, and it's really what you want as a frontline tank destroyer. I hate when I see people sniping with this because it is certainly not a sniping tank destroyer. This is a frontline vehicle, if not even a flanker. So yeah, A to that. The Chiha. This thing is incredible as a tier 3 tank. And that is simply, you could make every aspect of this tank crap, and it would still be made up by this gun. 81 millimeters of penetration on a tier 3 light is absurdly good. So I would give this thing an A+, because that gun is more than sufficient to fight at tier 3. Is perfectly good at getting through tier 4s and can even go through a lot of tier 5s. M26 Pershing, I like this thing so far. It has a very good ability to go hold down. The gun can be a little underwhelming at times. 180 is sometimes a little less than you may think. But overall, pretty darn good. It's got good accuracy on the move. And yeah, I'd give that guy an A. Birch gun I haven't played yet, so I'll skip past that. VK3001D is a pretty good sniper, pretty mobile. Turret traverse is good for a German. And overall, a pretty good jack of all trades, which is not very common of the German line. They're usually they very much stand out. So yeah, this thing is pretty much in my favor, although for whatever reason I seem to get pretty poor games in this thing. I don't know. I haven't played much German tanks, but it seems to be more of an American tank playstyle. So I'd give that thing an A-. AMX-12T, I think this thing is a little underestimated. You don't need the speed, because that autoloader gun will always just chew into the sides of isolated tanks. So it's not about the scouting, but when you get into tier 10 games, this thing does suck. I will admit that. So overall, A-, yeah. ARL 44. I don't know why people use the 90 when they can use this beautiful 105mm gun. The 300 damage is really nice, and this is amazing at tier 6, and will, if I'm thinking correctly, will be the most on a tier 6 heavy when the KV-1S might, if the KV-1S loses its 122, which I'm pretty sure it is in 8.9. But overall, with that 105, this thing is very well firepower. This front plate is extremely very good, well armored, and the turret just sucks. And that's the major flaw with this tank. So unfortunately, that turret is so weak that it brings it down to an A-. MT25, I haven't had much liking of this thing. That gun is still the awesome gun it was on the T-52, but this thing just feels, it's supposed to turn better, but it doesn't, because turning is also based on horsepower and your power to weight. And if your power to weight is lower than that of the T-52, effectively this thing turns about the same, if not worse, than the T-52 did. I know I never played the T-52 on the live server, but I played it quite a bit on the test server, and this thing feels like it's the same maneuverability, if not worse. And the speed is obviously worse. So I'm gonna have to go with a B on that, unless it's actually not half bad passive scout, but the view range is lacking. So yeah, B on that guy. KV-3, this thing has a lot of armor flaws, and thus I will give it a B, because this gun is the same as the IS, This thing is slower than the IS. It has much more weak spot than the IS. And this supposedly very tough turret has a weak spot there, and a weak spot there, and even I've been getting a lot of shots just through there, the cheek of the turret. Very consistently, people have been shooting me through there. So even the turret that's supposed to be very well armored at 130, 115, 115 doesn't actually do the job all that well. So I'm not seeing any defining characteristics of the KV-3 other than its potential to side scrape. SU-100M1, I've talked about that in a previous episode. Very good sniper, very underestimated, can flank. It's a very good tank. The only thing it lacks in is gun depression and gun traverse. I don't know why so many people hate this thing. If you can't pull off 175 pen at tier 7, then you're doing something wrong, I believe. Because 175 is a lot more than you may think. 5916, this autoloader, when you find something that you can pen, it really hurts. This thing, in addition to its pretty darn good passive scouting abilities, is a very good annoyance tank. Even if you're not penning, it's really, really irritating to have 5 shots fired like every 1 second at you. You love finding thinly armored high tier tanks and you just pump shots into them and they say, what the heck, why did I just lose 600 health? Well, maybe because you let a 5916 shoot at you. So that is a quick overview of all the tanks in my garage at the moment. So yeah, that is my garage, my opinion on most of these vehicles. I left out the Super Pershing and the Birch Gun because I haven't played the Birch Gun. And the Super Pershing I haven't played on 8.8 yet, but I assume it'll be in the B range. So yeah.